we all see ourselves as we've made it, and then we kind of like leave the in between. But
Right.
I feel like breaking something into small steps has been extremely fundamental.
Okay.
And then the other thing I would say is having a good team.
Yeah.
I wish I did that earlier, but I do think I could have pushed harder to get people to help me who are, way qualified in the same industry that I was in.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Aspire Higher with Coach Charles.
And Ivana.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're back. In fact, you have the privilege and the honor of hearing our incredible guest, Miss Navalayo Osembo. Some of you, by that name alone, may recognize her.
Yeah.
She is a CEO, entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
She is changing the face of footwear and sportwear. She has actually founded Enda Athletics, which is the face, I'm going to go ahead and say that, the face of African sportwear.
Woohoo!
And she's making a big move trying to shake things up here in the U.S. And some of that's going to come out in our conversation.
Yes.
But without further ado, this activist, this humanitarian, this
lawyer, accountant.
lawyer,
Keep going.
Literally, it doesn't stop.
Runner in experience, runner in something. She
What?
wants to be a runner. Yeah. Training.
I'm telling you, honestly, we are humbled to have her on our show.
Yes.
And we look forward to adding value to your life. Again, discussing purpose and also entrepreneurship and business concepts. So without further ado, what's up, Ava?
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you so much for having me.
That's great to see you, Ms. Nava. All right. So you want to
Nava.
jump in with the first question?
So Nava, yes, just first and foremost, tell us where you are
Yeah.
in the world.
I am currently in New Jersey, US.
New
right.
Jersey, okay.
But you were in Kenya, right? Or Nigeria?
Kenya.
Kenya.
I am from
That's right.
Kenya. The business operates and runs in Kenya, but we are also operating and running in the US as well.
Perfect.
That's
International
incredible.
and national.
Mm.
Wonderful. And give us a little bit of background. Tell our audience, what made you start your business?
Yeah.
What made you found this?
A couple of things. One, I've grown up around runners, but I didn't know that I was going to be in this kind of like business. But it's
Okay.
just people who've been around me and kind of seeing them really participate, generation after generation. And I was like, as an athlete, you kind of have a certain amount of shelf life,
Right,
how
that's
much
right.
you can earn for the rest of your life.
That's right.
And it kind of felt like a lot of the people that I knew were kind of getting into this cycle. And I was like, why don't we figure out how to get into the ownership so that we don't have to worry about how long this money is going to last? Someone
Come
can
on,
tap
come
into
on.
this multi-billion kind of like trade. And then, of
Yes.
course, I'm from Africa. I love Africa. And I do feel like there's a lot of misconception about Africa.
Yes.
And so I wanted something, nice and positive that tells our culture and connects to the world in a way that we can be proud about it, not the way that, other people might misconceive it. Just kind of be the driving seat of telling who we are and our stories as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's
I
beautiful.
first encountered your brand maybe 3 or 5 years ago, and it's really
Oh, really?
interesting. Yeah,
Interesting.
because I was looking for brands that had African originations, right?
Mhm.
The origination story. And I don't mean to make a joke about this, but with, Black Panther and things that are happening here in the US, that opened the eyes of our entire communities, right? To think more about the positive side, as you said, of Africa. And I hate to use that commercialized aspect to bring attention to things that are already going on in your country, your native land, but you are at the forefront of it. And there was other brands like Actively Black, which
Mhm.
came about, and they started really making big moves. And I saw you in that conversation. And that was what really struck me. I said, wow, look at this young lady.
Mhm.
She's
I was also surprised, if I can
Were
have
you?
it. I was like, wow, okay, I guess I'll take
but
that.
but it's true. But you set out with that vision
Yeah.
to change the landscape and to globally kind of challenge that I don't want to use the word monopoly, but the big
Yes.
structures
Right.
that we see
Correct.
in sportswear.
Right.
What drove you to that? Was that something that you accidentally stumbled upon?
I think I was more looking at the industry, and then once I got into the industry, I was able to see just how much, lack of representation there was. Even
Mm.
when you're talking from a perspective of Black people, even
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Black women was
Right.
Yeah,
like
true.
something else,
Right. Right.
And so I think, having studied development, having, history is one of my favorite subjects. I was like, we
Mm.
kind of have to change this, and the more we wait for someone to do it, the more difficult it becomes. I have to
Yeah.
say it's not been the easiest jobs, and it's
Mm.
something that, every day kind of like has a grind to it.
Right.
But I do feel that we owe ourselves, we owe our ancestors, we owe our
Mm.
future to be able to lay a foundation so that the next person who's kind of like coming in is building on that foundation as opposed
So
to not
beautiful.
Beautiful.
starting and kind of like complaining about it. So my attempt is to lay that foundation, for not just for myself, but for other brands as well. And just think it's possible with technology, with interconnectivity, it is possible to
Mm.
actually enter these markets and support each other as consumers. Because as you
Yes.
know, Black people are actually one of the highest consumer segments of
Of course.
footwear,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, and apparel. And so
Yes.
we have that buying power. Why not kind of
Right.
just like connect it to the manufacturing or the business
Mm.
power? So bringing that together, I think, will be very powerful.
Wow.
Wow. You are a
Amazing.
legend
Yeah,
already.
you are a legend already,
You
whether you
have
Thank
the
know it or
you.
not.
mind, you have the mindset, and you also know what it's like to want to advance where we came from in our history, and then
Yeah,
also catapult yourself to the next level by bringing a community with you. So
Wow.
yeah.
thank you so much for your efforts thus far. And we know it's not been easy, but that grind also points to your purpose and what you're supposed to be doing. So we appreciate that. Anything
Thank you.
exciting too in the works that we can expect from maybe some things that you're thinking of bringing or
Producing,
developing,
yeah.
producing?
Yeah, we are actually working on different fronts, and I'm
Okay.
hoping that they all come to fruition so that we can show the whole world. Next year is Olympics
Ooh.
year, which is a
Oh yes.
fantastic
Yeah.
Oh
stage
yes.
for showcasing, what creativity and culture. But I
Yes.
also think the Olympics for me is a big deal because, again, from a small brand perspective, it is another type of monopoly where only certain brands can get to, kind of like
Yes.
dominate the event.
Yes.
And one
Right.
of the things that was inspiring me was, again, looking at history, whether it's African American or kind of like African, there's always been that moment where there was this bigger force that made it almost impossible for the individual to kind of like fight against, but
Yes.
somehow through a collective it was possible.
Mm.
And
Right.
so I'm looking at the Olympics as a means of how can we as smaller brands kind of like change it without necessarily having to have the money to be involved in it.
Yes.
Right.
What
Right.
can we do with social media, with
Oh yeah.
communities and stuff like that, so that we can kind of be at the event without being at the event? And I
Correct.
think, there's so many founders like Fubu,
Yeah.
like who and brands that have been able to show that it is possible to kind of still use, not have resources and kind of like make moves with it. So we are hoping to kind of like have new product. We are working on a music collaboration, kind of like an anthem of sorts that kind of like
Okay.
Okay.
brings people together
Wow.
and kind
Hey.
of like can dance along to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we are also working on seeing, like telling more, Black and Pan African stories. We did start with Kenya
Yes.
as a running kind of like philosophy and heritage, but the more
Yes.
we've looked at our customer profile, the more we've seen there's basically everybody who's rooting Black
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
Black
that's right.
or
That's right.
supporting. And
Right,
I
right.
think we've always been looking at unity as a political thing. I
Yes.
actually think
Okay.
it's a social thing that,
Mm.
Yes.
what are the stories we're telling. And what I
Right.
like about footwear
Mhm.
specifically is that it's culture. We
Mhm.
tell stories, and that
Yeah, of
has been the
course. Look at the
African way.
history.
Yeah, it's been the African way for a really long time. And so
Right.
sometimes people have looked at it as like, oh, the early Africans never wrote any books. So, it's easy
Mm.
to say there was no history. But
Mm.
technically, there is a lot of history.
Of
It's
Yes.
in
course.
dance, it's in art, it's in
That's right.
poetry. And
Yes.
so, how can we bring all this together to make everybody kind of like under one identity and to change our future, basically, so that our kids don't have to have this identity or be defined by the world, but we are the ancestors that are really laying the foundation for them to have kind of like better lives.
Man, you're
Wow.
speaking
That's
so
beautiful.
well. And
Yes.
I love one of the things that keeps coming out in what you're bringing up. You're talking a lot about the next, not just generation,
Mm-hmm.
but platforms that you're building
Yeah.
that others can build off of.
That's right.
In fact, that's
Yes.
the whole essence of our brands and our
Mm-hmm.
business. And Aspire Higher Enterprises, that's what we're here for. We like to say we maximize our platform so that we can help propel others.
Right.
I love
Yeah.
that everything you've said has been all about
Yeah.
that.
Everything.
The intention behind what you're doing is
Mm-hmm.
not solely about you,
Right.
right? And a lot of people deal with the ego. What would you like to say about that thought? Because I saw you getting ready to say something.
She's ready.
Okay, as I said, I like history, and I think I always get frustrated when I look at African and African American history,
Yeah.
because you're kind of like looking at the start of this, the slave trade, for example, and you do
Right.
have guys who are literally throwing themselves off the ships and kind of like doing just to kind of like escape that reality. And I think in their minds that 200, 300 years from that time, I think they expected that their generations would have a better life, right?
Yeah.
Of
And then
course.
if they were to kind of like wake up right now, I don't think they'd be too happy
I
with
don't
what we're
think they would be
doing,
too
And
happy.
so I feel, again, looking at other societies, there has
Mhm.
been that continuum in terms of planning, 50, 100 years ahead.
Yes.
And we kind of have to get into that. And that also, it means accepting the fact that, you might not have that reward now,
Right.
but that ultimately we are doing it for the collective of the future. Because one thing I've learned coming out of Africa is that I am identified as Black, whether or not I am African or
Sure.
African
Right.
American. I am a
Right.
Black person, which is another
Yes.
identity kind of trying to navigate. And I'm like, well, I am Black, but I don't have that experience of, like a person kind of like growing up Black in America.
Right.
And so I see that commonality, and I see that we have that duty and vision to change the Black experience for our children, because we know it can be better, and we have that responsibility. And so we have to do it now, basically.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well
Whew.
spoken. Absolutely.
She's
I
amazing.
love listening to you
Me
speak. You
too.
can tell you put a lot of time and thought behind these.
Yes, and
Yeah.
learning continually.
Yeah. And there's a question I want to ask you then, because you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I have done a little research on you, and you've had a lot of different things you've tried. I mean, you had an athletic academy. You had fashion. You've done quite a few things. A farm. Didn't you farming? Like, come
That was
on.
crazy. Not recommended.
But there's something to be said about that. And I want you to speak to it. Here's why. Because a lot of people struggle with finding and identifying their purpose.
Right.
And they assume that they find it in this one moment. Like, here's my purpose. Now the rest of my life, I am after it.
Yeah.
But it was a process. And a lot of times, from what you just said, there's probably some painful periods of time as well. Could you talk about the earlier you and the process it took for you to get here?
Yeah, I mean, the earlier me, I think I've always kind of like been curious, but I think I've also had an attitude that I don't know when I'm gonna die, and so
I get it.
I don't want to have regrets. I think that's what really drives me. And,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that, if it's my time to check out, I have nothing, no stone
That's right.
unturned.
That's
It's a very risky way to live life, I think, now that I'm a bit older.
Yeah.
But I am always looking at what interests me as opposed to what money I can make the most. And I think that's kind of like
I love
worked
that.
for me. Mostly looking at if there's a writing competition about something I like, I'll do the writing competition.
Wow.
If there's like a thing about, people are, trying to do like whatever it is, I didn't know how to swim again, which is another statistic for Africans and African Americans, number one.
You didn't know how to swim.
Number one community that drowns. And I was like, I am in that category. I don't know how to swim. And I was like, in my early 30s, I was like, let's fix this. So I went to learn how to swim.
Right.
And then, my brother was an accountant, and he was like, I think you need to kind of like do this. And, it helps you understand how to run business, how to understand. And that's how I ended up doing accounting. So the only thing I knew I wanted to study was law, but everything else has kind of been, you get into a you get into a thing and you realize, oh, there's actually people, there's a community, there's so much that's happening. And that kind of just drives you in different places. So I'd say that that was it, basically just trying to do different businesses at an early age. But I think my parents were also really instrumental. Like they were like, just right. I never
Yeah.
felt that thing of, oh my God, you failed. This is terrible. It was just more like, one way, one thing out of the way.
Right. That's true.
Next.
That's
That's a
right. Yeah.
beautiful
Yeah.
perspective.
But all that
Yeah.
experience has shaped you, and that has
Yes.
formed you. And I love that you were willing to try and you were willing to explore different avenues and something new because they still
Absolutely.
have constructed who you are and how you
Yeah,
belong. So that's beautiful.
But how did
exactly.
failure shape some of
Yeah,
your
I was gonna.
story though? So go ahead. You
No,
want
no,
to
no,
ask?
go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think she was getting ready to ask the same question because I'm very curious. So how did those failures shape,
Right.
if you were to say it, your future?
Yeah.
Yeah, failure. I've had interesting relationships with failure, because I feel like earlier on, I wasn't really afraid of it. Okay,
Okay.
it depends. When I was in school, I was really afraid of it because I was in a very competitive high school and, kind of coming from my younger years, being very academically gifted,
Right.
then going to a school where everybody's academically gifted and all of a sudden
Mm.
you're like nowhere,
Yeah.
And so that was a difficult time in terms of, just accepting that there are other people who are like,
Right.
better than you and they do it
Jeez.
effortlessly and there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do about it.
Right.
But
Right.
I think that was an important lesson of kind of first just trimming my ego and also just realizing that there are some people who are really good at doing something and it's
Good.
just better off if you work with them
That's
and
it.
they help
Mm.
you do it as opposed to trying to be like them
Come
because
on.
you can never really match up,
That's
you
right.
know.
That's right. That's right. I
Yeah,
love
and
that.
so yeah, that was a harsh teenage lesson because I think like it took a couple of years to get to that point where I'm like, okay, I'm okay with not being kind of like top of my A game.
Right.
And then business failures, it means losing cash. I did,
Yeah.
there's once I'd gotten a loan from my brother. I lost all that money.
Mm.
I've lost a bunch of money here and there, but
Right.
one of the things that my dad says, which are really has been really useful, is always think of money as a tool. It is
That's
never a
right.
thing that you're supposed it's not the end, it is the
Right.
means. And
That's right.
so
That's
that
right.
made it very easy to say, okay, I tried it with the means and it didn't work, let's go
Right.
to the other method. Because I think when you look at money as the end and then you lose it, I think for a lot of people it becomes really difficult to get out from it because you're like, oh my God, I lost all that money, and it makes you
Yeah.
go crazy.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of
And
course.
so changing that relationship with money was really important. It doesn't mean you're wasting it, but at the same time, your life is not pegged on keeping it because you kind of have to gain some and lose some. And right now, I'd say what I'm facing again, kind of coming to the US and learning it's a whole different landscape from doing it online.
I could only
I
imagine.
am, yeah, and it's a little bit scary. I feel as you grow older. Now I have a family, and I'm like, if I mess up, my kids are messed up.
No.
And yeah, so first of all, I'd say, like I feel like now I'm kind of like evolving, but having
Yes.
people around me who kind of like done this were like, this is how it goes.
Right.
Yeah.
And also just having that reminder, going back to what I said at the beginning, I'm like, I don't want to live life with regrets.
Right.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
right.
that helps me to say, if I'm at my deathbed today, would I be okay? And I think I would be, and that's good enough for me.
That's a great
Mm-hmm.
place to be. And it's great that you said what you said too, because you, first of all, spoke to a lot of different people that listen. We have a lot of
Right.
professional athletes.
Yes.
We also have a lot of business leaders and owners that listen to this. And you spoke to some of the things that go through the mind of many of us at different phases of our life and our career.
Right.
And one of the most important things you talked about was the mindset of a person like yourself, right? Failure is forward. It's
Yeah.
never the final
That's right.
in your life.
That's right.
It literally is all about progressing until you find the thing that you're like, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can build this.
Yeah.
But then also
Yeah.
persistence.
Right.
The reason why I'm bringing that out is because we have people that listen. And a lot of times when we do these shows, or you can understand this, I mean, you're a business owner, people look at you and they're like, oh, yeah, but that's you. You can do this. You can take that type of risk. You can take that step.
Mhm.
Well,
Right.
what would you say to someone like that, especially young women?
I would say that first of all, you're the chief architect of your life. Like nobody's
Mm,
coming to fix it for you. You
that's
don't
right.
have
That's
to
right.
fix
That's
it.
right. That's right.
And then secondly, I think everyone, I think okay, the way my life has been, I think life has always been a test of responsibility. So
Mm,
no one's gonna come and say here's $1 million if you've never handled 50K or 100K,
Mm-hmm.
and so you kind of have to start with where you are. And sometimes, for me, it was having my day job and then
yeah.
using my evening hours to kind of like build my business.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it's really about starting where you are. And sometimes that's just as good as I just need to get to the prototype, and that's
Right.
kind of like good enough.
Right.
But the beauty of going, of keeping on doing is that it pushes you to be on the paths of people who are on the same path as you. So
Yes.
True.
for
Wow, you
example,
said something.
yeah, I did the tennis academy that failed. Just it was such a
Mm.
bad failure.
Just
From
experience. That's
that,
it. Mm-hmm.
it made me think tennis is not the sport. Then
Yeah.
maybe what's
Yeah.
the next sport? And then I
Right.
got to
Yes.
talk to other people, and I realized, oh, running is actually a fantastic sport to try and get
Mm,
into. And so, starting helps you to kind of just move forward, and moving
Right.
forward helps you to be in the orbit of similar minded people.
That's right.
And then you
yes.
That's right.
find information, and that helps you to kind of like proceed. So I don't think you owe it to yourself to just start where you are.
Right.
And of course, all of us wish we had rich parents with millions of dollars who would
Right.
Right.
just say,
Right.
Right.
yes.
Right. Just easy life.
Sadly, that's not the case. But I do believe everyone's journey makes them unique for who they are. And the
Yeah.
market
Yes.
is big enough for products like little tiny products that everybody might think they're insane, to
Right.
electrical cars. Like there's so much that you cannot discount yourself just because you're thinking you don't have this big idea. That small idea
Right.
Mm.
is very much needed and profitable as well.
You're
Wow, that
right
was
about
great.
that. Yes, I love this. First of all, you are amazing.
Yeah,
I
man.
love your confidence, and I love that even through life you have navigated it with such grit and understanding of what you're supposed to do, what your purpose to do, and all those
Yeah.
experiences are shaping the woman you are, and I'm just so proud of you first and foremost. So,
Yeah.
that's one
Thank
thing.
you.
Of course, of course. So, what can athletes look forward to? Yes, you mentioned the 2024 Olympics, but as a brand, what are you going to help athletes understand about your brand?
Yeah. And through your brand.
Yeah, I think athletes are very dear to my heart because I've kind of seen the hassle of trying to just make it,
Yeah.
and then
Mm.
there's
Yeah.
also the behind the scenes of when it's not a competition day, like it
Mm-hmm.
sucks. You
Yeah.
kind of have to wake
Yeah.
up early.
That's
You
right.
have to
Yep.
eat stuff that nobody
Discipline.
else is eating.
Yeah.
It's really a grind. And what I hope Enda to do for athletes is really first to just create a broader platform for sponsoring athletes,
Okay.
Mm.
because they need assistance to be able to become the champions they need to be, and
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
so that, and they have bills to pay.
Right.
And I
Yes.
do
Bottom
think that
line.
the
Right.
market has been very dominated by a few brands, and of course, where there's a domination or monopoly, it hurts the people who are in it, because you only take what you can kind of like get.
Yes.
And
Right.
so I'm hoping that we can broaden that field, so
Right.
that there's another plan B or a plan C for an athlete who's feeling like, I don't like the options that are in front of me,
Right.
Yes.
but
Right.
there's something else that's kind of like there. So I do think, from a sponsorship perspective, athletes need other smaller, bigger, like there's just other alternative brands need to
Yes.
get into that space. And then
Yes.
I also feel like athletes need to be able to have a voice. And
Mm-hmm.
again, as you kind of like build in some of these companies, like you don't really have a voice, because you're like how you say, like you're a cog in the gear. You're just kind of like
Yes.
Yes.
making
Yes.
things
Yes.
happen.
Yes.
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 And
Yes.
even though you're getting paid, you just know like there's some stuff that's going on behind the scene you can't talk about, because
Yeah.
you kind of have to shut up, and have to
Yep.
take the
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm hoping that, through us, we can be able to tell the stories of athletes, or be able to be a channel where, we can voice some of the issues that we see or the athletes are telling us, just so that we can also use our platforms to create change, and say, that certain things need to change in the industry, because there are a lot of things that can be better.
Of
But
Yes.
course.
athletes as individuals sometimes don't want to take that risk,
Right.
and sometimes they don't have that platform. So I'm hoping the brand can be that for them.
Beautiful.
Wow, that's amazing. What makes your brand so different, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about the history, but what if someone were to ask you, if you were the number one shoe brand in the world right now,
Mhm.
why would you be the leader? What makes you significantly different than the rest? And what might you do different if you had that type of influence?
That's a good question. I've been thinking about it a lot because we've been doing value prop for the customers and trying to see whether we've changed as a business. But I would say that, I want us to be the brand that is kind of like connecting the world to Africa and the African spirit of sports. That when you think Africa sports culture, you think of us. And the reason why this is important as well, as I said, is that, there's different elements from a technical sports perspective. I've thought about technical sports is good, but it's not niche. I mean, it's
That's
not
true.
a broader market, it's niche. And so even if I am influencing the running space and I'm not influencing everybody else, I still see that as a loss. Because we want to tell our stories. We want to show products that when you look at them, you're like, oh, what's this about? And what's this about?
Yeah.
We want to instill pride. I think some of that is lost in terms of positivity, in terms of what it means to be an African brand, what it means to be a brand that's kind of like different. And quite honestly, right now in the running space, that doesn't exist. I think culturally there are some brands that are kind of like stepping up, but they're not big enough to kind of like connect. And I do think there's a huge and deep sense of pride, especially if you're looking at the future. In terms of the population, the demographic change, like everyone's gonna be black, or majority. And so how do we do that in a way that instills pride? One of my favorite writers always says, if you are not rooted in yourself, then everything else will come and kind of like sway you. And I look at this next generation and I feel like they're kind of like going along, but they're not rooted deeply in terms of what does it mean, what's my place to kind of like advance myself, my community and stuff like that. So I would say kind of like from a broader perspective, the connection to African culture, African stories. And then from a technical perspective, just having really great products in terms of the quality of the products to be really good. So that people can be proud of wearing,
and represent it.
Good quality. You're not just talking the talk and not giving you the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, very wonderful. I love it.
It's a lot to look forward to.
Man, this woman is on it. And the beautiful thing is you really know your brand. It's not like you know your mission.
Authentically.
You very well versed and define that.
Yes.
Any question you have in particular?
No, go ahead.
All right. So I guess if there's another question I had to ask you, we've already talked about your failures. We've talked about how it's kind of giving you this opportunity to become you. And then you gave some advice to our listeners on just start, right? You said wherever you are, there's some things that you've learned over these years. If you had to give some knowledge, it doesn't matter what the topic regarding building a brand, or this is what I feel passionate about, or is my purpose, and I know I can start, but what are some practical steps that either you took or wish you had taken based off everything you've been through that you can give to someone who's listening or watching right now?
I would say have a schedule with timelines. I think that has been really helpful in terms of, just one step. I think we all get, we all see ourselves as we've made it, and then we kind of like keep the in between. But just starting means I'm gonna go figure out how to get a website done. That's it.
That's
And so I feel like breaking something into small steps has been extremely fundamental. And then the other thing I would say is having a good team. I wish I did that earlier. Of course, there's kind of like monetary restrictions in terms of what's available, but I do think I could have pushed harder to get people to help me who are way qualified in the same industry that I was in. We kind of tinkered our way around, but I do think our growth would have been much different if we knew what we were doing initially. But that doesn't mean it stops. But I just say finding people is just really being at events, reaching out to people on LinkedIn. But just making sure that you have people who are kind of like helping you to grow and develop.
That's right.
And then I'd also say find a support system. The entrepreneurship journey is very lonely.
It is
extremely, and you kind of need to have the that system that keeps you moving and say you kind of like got it. It's like your own cheer crew, like your hype people, like let's do this. And so I have found from experience that older people have been more, like people who've done it.
Yeah.
They have really helped me to stay on the course, even when I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
They have
Yes.
helped me look at, and that's why for me, even the whole aspect of having no regret is a
Yeah.
big deal, because I've spoken to people who have certain regrets and they are like, you don't want this when you're 60s or 70s.
They're like,
That's
just
true,
do
too.
it.
Yeah,
Keep
that's
going.
right.
Yeah, exactly. So you need people who can kind of like cheer you on, because
Right.
it's lonely. And if you have people around you who are just, doubting and not helping,
Right.
I don't think that's kind of like going to help.
Mm.
And yeah, I'd say the scheduling, going back to my first point, it really helps you set timelines on stuff that you need to do.
Right.
Because I feel like there's so much information, but you can only find it if you put time aside for it.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Restructuring and prioritizing are extremely important. I'm grateful that you do that, and I know you've seen huge success. We also promote that with our clients as well.
Yes.
Like you have to put those things in order first, because that's developing a system, and that's what you're going to be generating from. So yes, we much respect to that, and I'm grateful that you do have that in place. It's perfect.
And you have to have deadlines. You have to give yourself a time.
Realistic.
In our book, I don't know if you know much about our book. It's called The Flight of Your Life, The Power of Propulsion. And every time we do a show, we bring references out of that book, because you're speaking to it. What we hope to do is have people like yourself show that these principles are being applied all around the world through ordinary people who happen to look like superheroes. They look like you, but it's because you're doing the work, though. You may not see it, but the reality of it is all of us have that superhero in us. All of us have been given the flight clearance. It's just a matter of pushing. You use that word multiple times. People that push you. Your passions push you. You pushing yourself. And you said something really interesting that I'm grateful you brought out. You are African by descent. I mean, of course we are, but you understand you're closer in the lineage to it than we are. And there's a phrase or a proverb that you may be familiar with. And it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But the crazy thing about it, and we break this down in our book, is wisdom is not always face value. So it sounds at face, well, if you want to go far, you need a whole team. It sounds at face, well, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. But in reality, there are many things, if you look at wisdom as it speaks, that are slow, that are made specifically to move fast things.
Very true.
And there are a lot of fast things that are made specifically to move the things that are slow.
That's true.
There's seasons, there are ebbs and flows. You just have to be prepared for both. And what I'm listening to is you've been through seasons of both. Can you talk to the pain of some of those slow periods and talk about some of the fast periods? I think everyone could benefit from that.
Yeah, I'm actually going through a slow period right now. So
it's okay. That's okay.
Completely okay. But that's the nature of pursuing the passion and the dream, right? Go ahead.
That is true. And that's why I say it's kind of like lonely, and you're going to have people around you who support you, because I think, fast coming to the realization that, we needed to be closer to the market. And understand really what it is that's driving the customer and how we can be better at it. And this is also a moment where we've had to restructure the business. We've had to change a lot of stuff, and it's been too much change. I think it's kind of like made me, question the journey a bit. I know it's going to work out, but it's really a rough period where things are not working out exactly the way I wanted them to work out. And, of course, there's sometimes you kind of look around and like, but I know I can do it. Other people are doing it. Why am I kind of like being stuck? So I'd say, it is very much ebb and flow, and the ebbs and flows are extreme because the highs are high and the lows are low. But what's keeping me right now is just the vision in terms of what I need to achieve and what needs to be. And I think, again, when you do something with passion, I can't leave it halfway done.
That's right. Excellent.
To get it to the next level. And that might include having other people helping me lead this. It's like a relay race. Actually, I do think I'm in a relay race.
You might be in there.
You just might be.
You better have some fast people, though. You know your lineage.
You need fast people, like need people.
That's
so
right.
Sometimes it's really a sprint and you get tired, and you need someone to hand that baton to and say, go the the next round, and then
That's
I'll
right.
be here to hold it when you
Yes.
kind of like do that. So I'd say there are those moments. Again, also, the business needs like heavy investment in terms of, we've basically changed our strategy and we kind of have to fundraise again.
Mm.
And, again, kind of coming, being an introvert and having again to fundraise, it's really difficult.
Yeah. Listen, find the
Yeah. And
extrovert. It's
so,
okay.
yeah,
hmm
it's just kind of like reminding me why I need to do this,
Of
but
course.
I don't want to underestimate just sometimes how difficult that journey is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But the highs have also been really high. I think, the earlier part of last year was, I was like all over the place. I was meeting all these famous people.
Yeah,
I
that's what I
was,
mean. I mean, you blew up quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it
It's
was
exciting.
like very intense. And again, that's also one of the things that I've kind of like learned. I mean, I knew it, but it's very different. I used to work in consulting, and now I tell my friends, I know why we would go to businesses and say, you should do A, B, C, D. And then we
Mm.
come back next year and they haven't done it. And
Not
we're like, what
any
is
of it.
wrong?
Yeah.
hmm
Haven't you done it? And now that I'm on the other side, I'm like, I know.
Now you
Now
know.
I
Exactly.
understand
Yes.
why it took so long.
Right.
But this whole process has taught me that you kind of need to have processes really nailed.
Right.
Mm.
And again, when we start businesses, we are always just saying, am I making some money?
Yeah.
But I have learned that money is number two and process is
Yes. Come
number
on,
one.
Come on.
girl.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
Say that
because
again.
if you get the money
Yeah.
and you have like a leak that's this big,
Yeah.
you're gonna, if you leak like $100, you're gonna be leaking $1 million.
Yeah,
That's right.
there's no
That's right.
doubts.
That's right. That's good wisdom.
Yeah, and
That is
so
great
the
wisdom.
systems. I cannot just emphasize
Yeah.
that the system has to be able to stretch and expand,
Yes.
almost kind of like just how like your lungs do. And I think that's where we are as a business, where we're more like, okay, let's just take it and make sure that each and every area somebody can walk in from outside tomorrow and they'll know exactly what needs to be done, who needs
Right.
to do it, and stuff like that.
Right.
And I think that's something that when we start, we don't really pay much attention to. And nowadays, when I meet someone and they're like, "Oh my God, if I could have this much amount of money, I would do this."
Right.
I'm like, I don't think you're ready
Yep.
for the money.
That and
Like,
come
I
on,
don't
girl.
Right.
process it.
Some of our listeners are hearing that, and
Yes,
that's a
that's the
great
accounting
point of
side
wisdom.
of her.
That's right. That's right. Keep going.
Yeah.
And especially if it's debt, I'm like, there's so many things you kind of have to think about.
Right.
But you kind of have to be ready, and the business has to be ready. Otherwise, you're gonna spoil something that is really beautiful,
Yeah.
or you might give up too early because the math doesn't add up. But
Right,
because you
right.
introduced something too early before the baby could crawl, you are basically taking the baby to high school, and they're like, yeah, you can study chemistry or something like that. Yeah. So the business is, you have to pace yourself.
Yeah.
But the highs, I think, the highs can be sustained by process.
Yes.
If it's not process, you're just going to be a one-hit wonder.
Right.
No one wants to be a one-hit wonder.
Oof.
Come on, man. Faith, she's
Gems,
giving some
gems.
business school wisdom here right now, girl.
I love it.
I
It's
mean,
all of her. I
that
love
is
that.
all
Full of
facets of
hard
you.
knocks.
But one thing I really do love is that you talked about vision, right? So we know that without having a vision, you will perish.
That's right.
But everything
Yes.
that you've done, whether it be a slow season, a busy season, whether you're running a marathon or whether you're running a sprint, you have to have vision for your business, for your foundations, for who you are and what you want to do in this world. And I'm so grateful that you've learned to be okay with taking time to just look at the processes, develop those systems so that you're not coming out into the world premature as a brand at all. You're ready, you're
Exactly.
equipped, and you're mature. And that's how we equip our clients
Yeah.
as well. Don't try to come out like, I want to be a boss. I want to be a CEO. I want to be ready.
Right.
Well, how are you preparing yourself in the slow season?
Yes.
That
Exactly.
matters.
Yes.
How are you spending time with yourself and learning, okay, this is how I want to structure my life? Because once you learn how to structure yourself, now
Yeah.
you can structure a team. Then you can structure a business and an
That's right.
organization and keeps growing. But you have to do the work first and be okay if it's not a
Yeah.
fast season, but a slow season.
Mm.
Absolutely. And just to add on that, I think, my friends and I, who are also running businesses, were just laughing how, we were all employees a couple of years ago, and now we're kind of like owning our own business, and just how
Perfect.
different
Yes.
an employee mindset is
Yes.
from like
Yes.
There's a shift.
Oh, yeah.
Can you speak about that a little
Yeah,
bit?
that's a good one.
Can you speak about that a little bit?
Mhm.
That difference?
Yeah, I think, and I feel like there's a lot of generational differences in terms of
course.
what's
Oh, yes.
expected. Yeah, but I would say, there is that being, everybody wants to run their own business and be in
Yes.
Right.
control of their time, right?
Right.
But one of the things I always say that, like running your own business is not being in control of your time. Like your
Right.
business will dictate your time.
Yes.
Yes.
And so you might find that it might be easier to actually shut down your laptop at 5 p.m. You're
Yeah.
not going to do that.
No.
Yeah.
You might be doing that at 2 a.m. in the morning
At
because
Right.
there's
5
no
a.m.
Right. Yeah,
sometimes
literally. Yeah.
straight.
We've been
Exactly.
there.
And you also can't
Right.
just leave stuff for someone else to do
Right.
because there is no big corporate excesses for like you have to make sure that it's kind of being done.
Yeah.
And so, my perspective has been if you are not excellent in your own work, in your own stuff, when nobody is seeing you, you can't run a business.
Come on.
It's
Come
just,
on.
it's
Tell them. You
just
tell our
Come
audience.
on, doctor. Can
Tell
I call you
them.
another way
doctor?
to say it.
I
Like
think she's
you
a doctor.
can't, because
Pretty much.
if you do that, you're just gonna lose money and time and
Yes.
stuff like that. And so you have to,
Mm.
some people are more like, I don't care about my employer, they pay me and it's very transactional.
Mhm.
And I'm like, if you wanna go the business
Mm.
path, it's not transactional.
Right.
And in fact, you should be figuring out why this person is doing something, like learn from them. And the best place to learn is like when you're under them and you're getting paid to do what you have. You like
That's
be there, ask your boss, what's needed, why is this
Yes.
spending, why are you
Yes.
upset over this and stuff
Right.
like that. That not only builds your knowledge, but it
Mhm.
also builds you as an employee. I want to leave my business to somebody who is, taking initiative and stuff like that. And so I find I'm really conflicted with this new generational approach of I only give what I give. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Mm.
it doesn't work like that, especially if
Right.
you want to grow and you want to develop. And I see that mostly as personal development
Yes.
and also as for the future. These responsibilities are massive. And
Mhm.
if you're not able to kind of like shoulder it, then it's gonna be, I'm just like, don't start a business.
Yes. No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And some people
Yeah.
don't need to. That's
and
a good part.
and that's also
You know,
true as
it's
well.
yeah.
Or like she said, get your tuition-free education in your job
Right.
so that you
Yeah.
can take those
That's right.
skills
That's
into a
right.
venture that grows eventually into your business.
Right. Right.
But
That is true.
you
And
said
also if you're growing your career, I'm like, who is the person who's given the most responsibility? At least if you're working in a place where there's merit, like you want, as an employer, I want people who ask questions. I want people who query. I want people who tell me that's not a good idea. Like,
Right.
Yes.
but
Right.
then if
Right.
you're that employee who's always quiet,
Right.
you're just like, I'm doing my bit.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not giving you a promotion as well. And so
Yeah.
even if you're not looking at something from like, you don't want to be an entrepreneur,
Yes.
I don't know how you are going to build yourself and
Yes,
in your
yourself.
career if you're not that person who we can kind of like count
Of
on to be able
course.
to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I do know, employee relations a little bit touchy because companies have not always been the best employers.
Yes.
But at the same time, from my experience, looking at it now from an employer perspective,
Yeah.
I see so many opportunities where people could step up and they don't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's your loss. Let me
Yes.
find someone else who can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting ready to wrap up the show, but I want to
It's
say this
phenomenal.
because we have received so much knowledge
Yes.
and wisdom from your experience. And we're so grateful to say that we've earned a new friend.
Yeah.
And we're going to be supporting you, clapping for you. Yo,
Yes.
shoot us some shoes. You want us
Yes.
to take
Come
some
on. Sponsor me.
pictures and videos. We'll do whatever you need, man. We'll promote
Yeah.
as
We'll get the
best
word out
as
there.
we can.
Absolutely.
But the one
Absolutely.
thing that I want to compliment you on, and you really are a shining example of it, is your character.
Yes.
I think ultimately speaking, everything you've been through
Yeah.
and all that you're doing, even as you run your business, is an example of your character. Because the one part you didn't talk about when things got fast, you were getting ready to touch on it, was all of a sudden you were thrust into a world where you went from a
Yeah.
no name
Right.
to everyone knows your name.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it put you in rooms that you didn't see for yourself. And all these
Yeah.
famous people
The
and
pressure.
all these legends and
Yeah.
actors and athletes,
Yeah.
people knew you and wanted to associate with you. And like you said, you were talking about character established to run a business,
Mhm.
right? But also
Yeah.
you need character to keep you when those highs and the fast
Absolutely.
periods come.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
you've done a
That is
great
very
job.
true. Yeah, that is very true. And thank you.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you so much for being a part of our show. We thank you so much for pouring into our audience. You gave us wisdom, insight, knowledge, experience, credibility.
Oh, yeah.
What more could you want?
Yeah, man. And an example. Thank you for what you're doing for the culture.
Absolutely.
And not just our culture.
Right.
Because whenever our culture improves, I like to believe that all of the cultures of the world improve as well.
Absolutely.
That's true.
It is independent and also interconnected.
Absolutely.
But, it's not just saying that we have to, all of us can grow if all of us are at our best.
That's right. That's right. Well, you stay at your best.
Yes,
you hear
girl.
me? We love your best. We support your best. We're here with you. Thank you so much. Please, 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 for our audience, if you're listening, please tune in. First, Navalayo, where can they find you? How can people connect with you?
Endasportswear.com. That's our website. And I am on LinkedIn as Navalayo Osembo.
Perfect.
And, not too much on Instagram now, but,
it's okay.
Mostly
LinkedIn. Listen, link it up.
Look up Enda, Enda Sportswear, and tell me.
Enda Sportswear.
Okay.
What can people find on your sportswear site? Give them just a quick layout. What can they get if they shopped on your site?
They would find different types of shoes or different types of sneakers or shoes for different types of occasions.
Perfect.
And mostly each one is telling a story so that you kind of get to know something about Africa, something about running culture, something about evolution of us as a species. But you kind of get something from that as well in terms of what we're selling.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she's not only going to show you her history, but she developed the history inside the product.
And the product. And they're elite products.
That's what I'm talking about. Because you're right-minded. I love that. I love that. I love that.
And these are elite products too.
These are elite, right?
Yeah.
Come on, professional athletes. We got to support her. You
gotta
hear me?
do it.
Let's do this.
All
And
our
business
professional
people and
athletes.
partners. Listen, if you're listening, partner with this vision
Just
if
go
it
get a
speaks
few
to you.
pair.
Okay? Well, thank you so much, everyone in our audience. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast, Aspire Higher, with Charles and Ivana. And we have Navalayo here as our guest. Thank you so much again for your time. And you know where to find her. We also have the link in our description. But thank you again. And until next time.
Until next time.